All right, friends. Again, I'll ask if possible we can have the microphones muted. I wonder if I can just do this for all of you. Yeah, there we go. And settle in. You can think of this as an extension of the Dhamma talk, extension of the meditation, in that you can use this time for reflection. I'll give some words of Dhamma, some words of encouragement to aid you in your practice and to just as an offering to delight in this Uposatha day and the opportunity. It's always an auspicious day when spiritual friends gather and practice together. It compounds the goodness of one's practice to share it with others. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namasami. Well, happy full moon. And again, I delight in all of you gathering, taking the precepts, sitting, listening to the Dhamma, being willing to practice for at least this much of the evening, but maybe some of you will stay on. And I have a lot of gratitude for that. And that happens to be what I'd like to speak on this evening, a particular mind state, which is energizing, which is beautiful, which is very near and dear to my heart and very near and dear to the heart of noble beings. And that is the state of gratitude. And this is a wonderful component of our practice, when we endeavor to towards spiritual cultivation, towards developing ourselves. This is one of those necessary states along the way. It's very interesting, though, that if one were to do a survey of the major well-known teachings of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, maybe the Five Powers, one wouldn't find a single mention of gratitude in any of the 37 dhammas that are known as the Bodhipakya dhammas that the Buddha codified as a way of passing on some of his most important teachings. And yet, it's such an essential state if one were to do a survey of the whole Pali Canon and do a search for a word like gratitude or grateful, one would see that it shows up a lot in the Jatakas. And pretty much any time when the Bodhisattva or the Buddha to be in his former lives was born as a noble being who had a lot of virtue, he was described as somebody who was grateful, who had gratitude to his teachers and to his friends, to his family. It was the mark of a noble being that everybody could understand. It was one of these qualities that could be pointed to. Or you couldn't say that he was always born into a good family, or that he was always respected, or that he was always free from disease. You couldn't say that. But one thing you could say was that he always showed gratitude in response to the good things that had been done for him. And this was the defining trait. And one thing that the Buddha does say in the Pali Canon is that this is a defining trait of noble beings. But then why isn't it mentioned? Why isn't it codified? Why don't we have a list of 5 this or 8 that? with gratitude in it? Well, I think we can look at the word gratitude, and maybe there's a lot to be said for the words that we use to describe things that are intangible. So gratitude or grateful comes from the same root as gracious, grace. What is it to be full of grace? Well, it's a state of being aware of divinity, being aware of blessings, being aware of the joys of life. This is to be in grace, is to be grateful. They're one and the same. And I also think it's very interesting that we have a word, ingrate, which is synonymous with foolish or stupid, which is the opposite of that. And I do think this is something that we all kind of intuit when we see somebody who doesn't know what they've been given, who doesn't appreciate the gifts that they have and the blessings that they have, and who levels abuse at those who have taken care of them. We think of that person as foolish. And this is all worked into the very word that we use to describe this mind state. And in Pali, the word is very interesting. It's katanyu. And katanyu is a contraction of two words, kata and anyu. Anyu means to know, and kata means what is done. It's a very simple premise. Gratitude is knowing what has been done, specifically knowing what has been done for us. This is something quite essential, isn't it? It's something quite basic. Maybe that's why it's not in any list. Maybe one could say that until one has any sort of sense of gratitude, maybe the ego is just too strong for the Dhamma to really even get in, for us to sit down and pay attention and pay respect. Maybe a little bit of gratitude is already there. Maybe it's a prerequisite for even getting on the path, is to recognize the opportunity we have and the blessings we have and the gifts that we've been given. Gratitude is a selfless mind state, and that's why it's so near and dear. I once walked into a person's house and they had a nice Buddhist wall calendar. And for that particular month, it was the month of January, and it had a little quote on it. It said, "Gratitude is a wonderful way to bring yourself to the present moment." And I looked at that and I said, thank you. That's a fantastic reminder. And that sort of, gratitude is just that. It's just simple. It's in the moment. It's one of the best things that we can turn to bring us right back to a sense of selflessness and appreciation and joy. So in contrast to some of the more austere states, the states of renunciation, of keeping precepts, cultivating sila, gratitude is that state where it's okay to be happy. It's a joyful, energetic state. It's an adornment to any meditation, and especially like this evening, where some of us will have the chance to do a few hours of meditation together. Then what better thing than to start with a bit of this mind state, this gratitude. Now, it is essential. It is a kind of basic thing, but that's not to say that we're deficient as human beings if we don't have a ton of gratitude. That many people in the world, they think of mind states as something you're born with. A roll of the dice, maybe a wiring of the brain. This is how the world tends to think of the mind. People identify with it. Some people have gratitude, and those are grateful, gracious, wonderful people, and some people don't have it, and they're jerks. And this is just the way things are. But in Buddhism, we don't take the mind to be self. When we notice there is a wholesome mind state, It's right there in the Eightfold Path. We should cultivate energy towards the development of that mind state. If we notice we don't have a lot of gratitude, or we have a lot of bitterness or resentment, or just a lack of knowing what is done for us, then we can cultivate it. We can grow it as we do any plant in a garden. Bhavana literally means to cultivate, like to farm or to grow plants. And this is what we can do for a mind state, a wonderful mind state like this. We can just see it as something we would like to develop. And this is it's a wonderful endeavor, to bring this state into mind. And it requires us to kind of contemplate, and specifically to contemplate something which is in sort of contrast to the defilements of the mind. In order to have even a sliver of gratitude, we have to be coming from a place that is not wrapped up in ourself, is not wrapped up in selfish thinking. And so I like to start, if I notice I would like to turn towards this state, I usually start by thinking of something that's been done for me. So when we're cultivating gratitude, we might think of something we've been given, or a service that's been done for us. And as a monastic, this is quite present and quite easy. As monastics, we can't buy, store, or cook the food that we eat. We can only eat those things which are given to us on that very day. So every single day of my monastic life in which I have eaten something, it's been given to me that very day. So anytime when I want to develop gratitude, I can just think, did I get something to eat? And if so, then there was a gift involved. And I can turn towards that. But even if we're not a monastic, we've been given things. It just requires thinking about exchange, thinking about receiving. What did we not have when we woke up that we had later on? And that only got to us through some sort of giving or transfer. This is something that gets hidden in a consumer society, in a capitalist society. We think, I had money, I gave it to the clerk, they gave me what I wanted, I bought it. It became mine because I paid for it. But the reality, if we get down to it, the clerk didn't have to give us the thing that we paid for. They could have just kept it. So everything we consume, everything we get, even if there was some exchange in both directions, nevertheless, it had to be relinquished to come into our possession. But even if it's hard to think this way, we can think of simple services, acts of friendliness. And so think, was there any time today or in the last few days that really stood out where somebody was kind? Maybe they held a door for you, or they offered you something of what they had, or they made room for you, or let you go first in traffic. All of these things are wonderful examples of people just for a moment, like, putting somebody else first. That's a gift. That's a wonderful thing. It's not demanded. It's not expected. It's a momentary, spontaneous, selfless act. And we might be able to think of these. But even if it's hard, to call that to mind, and it's worth trying. It's worth, looking and thinking until we get there. Because just as this is an essential state, it's also one that easily gets covered up by the hindrances and by the subtle versions of self-identity and identity view and selfish thinking and conceit. These things can work their way in there and hide it. And they can get in our way when we try to be like, come on, somebody gave me something today. Why can't I think of anything? Well, if we have any difficulty, we can turn our mind towards what we call in the development of metta, or loving kindness, a benefactor. And a benefactor is somebody that we recognize has habitually put us before themselves, or habitually given to us, or shared with us, or taken care of us, or shown us friendliness, or even love. When we think of a benefactor, it might be a teacher, it might be a mentor, it might be a dear friend. And in that moment where we think of this person, we can probably think of something they've done for us, something, some way that they made us feel, just through being kind, through being friendly, through looking out for us. And in that moment where we can actually say, yeah, you're right, so-and-so did do that for me. We're there. And this is a subtle thing, an important thing to look for. It can take a little bit of effort to get it started, especially if we don't regularly do this practice. But once we get there, we'll see there's something very different about this mind state. The second we can recognize that we've been given something, there isn't that same edge of me, mine. It's been taken away with the simple recognition that we've been given something. And I think this is why the Pali word is just straight to the point, knowing what's been done. That moment where we actually can know what's been done for us, even a small thing, is an important moment, is a wholesome mind state. So to get there, and then to think, okay, yeah, I've been given something. And now in the development, either we can linger with that, and that impression it has on the mind. Okay, this is what it's like to know what's been done. This is what it's like to be grateful, to be thankful, to say, okay, that was great. And we have this saying in Theravada, anumodana, and it's a sort of expression of delight in somebody doing something good. And it's a spontaneous thing, it's a simple thing. And the thing is, it is in itself wholesome. To recognize and have gratitude for something that someone's done is a wholesome act. And it just multiplies the good stuff that comes from one action or one word or one kind gesture. And so we can develop this. This can be something we go to. If that impression starts to fade a little, we can renew it. And maybe we can think of something else that person has done for us. If we're thinking of a benefactor, or maybe if we're thinking of just something we were given today, then in finally recognizing that we were given something, maybe another thing comes to mind. You're like, oh yeah, well, so-and-so, even before that, so-and-so did this for me. And then we might notice it's getting a bit easier. And so did that. Oh, and so was so nice. And I don't really have a problem with so-and-so. They were really easy to get along with today. And we might see that metta, the sense of friendliness, is in and of itself a gift. When we're offered metta by somebody in the world, it makes us feel at ease. As it says in the Metta Sutta, happy and secure. It makes us feel a bit safer in the world. Like, okay, yeah, no, we're okay. You and me, that person and I, we're okay. And we feel a bit more settled. And when we start to turn towards the things that have been done to us, it's something. Can be a very powerful thing for a practitioner at first. Many practitioners begin with an idea of gratitude or an idea of metta, and they go for it. They try and bring up energy and try to make themselves feel these things. They're like, I look at other people and I listen to what they say and how they describe this, and they seem so happy. Why am I not getting that? Well, if we've never cultivated it, then it's like trying to grow a plant in rocky soil. Maybe it'll take a bit of energy. It'll take a bit of digging and preparing, before the field is ready. But it's a good effort, and we'll have to learn along the way. And we can tell by all the times that I've mentioned this mind state, I don't subscribe to the idea that in talking about these mind states, we cheapen them or we scare them away. In Buddhism, we're able to be pretty straightforward about what are wholesome mind states and what are unwholesome mind states, because it really pays to know, it pays to recognize. It's like when we know what is good and what isn't, we can, for one, we can have that expression of anumodana. We can be like, okay, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Oh, that's good. And we can build it in ourselves. But also, if we don't feel it right away, we can know that the only reason we're not experiencing this state, which is a basic kind of prerequisite to metta, and that feeling of joy and energy and contentment and settledness, is just because we haven't done it yet. It takes a little bit of pressing. And some people relate this to like a breakthrough or like a melting of the heart in that moment when they finally get past a habitual self-view or selfish way of thinking. And they get that first taste of like, oh yes, somebody did something for me. It's in the development of metta, we're often talking about that ability to have metta for ourselves. And there's something to be said for being grateful in that it's a recognition that somebody did do something for us. Well, that means there must be some value to us as a person for somebody to be able to do that. It kind of opens us a little, even if it has to kind of crack open our shell a bit, to see that, well, if somebody gave me something, I can't be that bad. And it gets things warmed up, it gets things flowing. And then little by little, this is going to get easier. Now, the development of a wholesome mind state is always going to go through patterns. And in the commentaries, when they talk about Katanyu, they also talk about another state they call cultivated. And cultivated is sort of like a desire to reciprocate. And as I say, that's that upwelling of energy in recognizing what's been done for us. It's a feeling of wanting to give back, or at least wanting to thank that person. Wanting to express ourselves. It kind of bubbles up. And this is something we'll notice when we first get on a roll and we're like, oh yeah, so-and-so did that, and so-and-so did that, and so-and-so did that. We start to get that feeling of grace. We start to get that feeling of being blessed. And suddenly something starts welling up and it's like, how could I repay them? I have to do something. I have to thank them. I have to find that person. And we get this energy that's practically lifting us up off of our seat. And so in getting to the beginning of a wholesome mind state, suddenly this might be jarring, and suddenly having joy and energy in the mind, and it's going to compel us. But the thing about a mind state, and the thing about bhavana or development, is it should eventually culminate to where we can have a mind state without being compelled to do something, where certain actions and speech can arise from that mind state, but there's no compulsion, there's no being forced to do something, that it comes naturally as when we want something, we just reach up onto a counter and get it down. This is basic, and it's a kind of, when the state is fully developed, it's going to be as natural to us as our breathing. And I think that's a good metaphor, because our breath is in and out. It's flowing, it's gradual, it's soft when it's balanced. And so we might notice when we finally start to get it going, there's this sense that we have to go out and do something. We have to make good on this. We've been given something, now we've got to go and give to others. And that's okay. I mean, it's a wholesome mind state. It's a good mind state. It's an energetic mind state. Sadhu, 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 let's get out there and make the world a better place. But we can also hold on a minute because it is just a mind state. And this is, it's a wonderful thing. And we can start to feel that joy. And for many of us, it's like, it's a novel experience to feel that much joy. It almost feels like we're going to explode. We can't sit still. But we can develop the state further. And it comes with a sort of paradox in recognizing more and more of the things that have been done to us, and more being able to feel and embody that sense that we want to give back, that we want to thank people, that we need to show that we finally see all of the things that we've been given. There's this paradox that we're also feeling a sense of sobriety and knowing that in some ways it's not possible. In some ways, the people that have given us things are out of reach. Some have passed away, or some are no longer in our lives. Or sometimes we're given things by people we don't even know. So how could we possibly thank them? And in other times we feel this sense of gratitude. And this is how it's talked about in many world religions. And it doesn't seem to have a person attached to it. It doesn't seem to have an object. Maybe we're feeling grateful to be alive, or we're feeling that we're so glad that, you know, we're in nature, and we're like, well, thank you for the smell of a flower, or thank you for the song of a bird, or thank you for the breeze. Like, how can you thank nature? How can you really thank the people who have given you love, friendliness, security, happiness, peace? How could you possibly repay that? And this is this interesting dynamic when we sit down. And this is why some people get afraid to think about these things or to cultivate these things intentionally. Because yeah, the Buddha said, you know, when a fool learns something, it's sometimes to their detriment, because it'll destroy their innate goodness by starting to think about and conceptualize something. But we know that in Buddhism, we might have to go through these phases, but that's part of the practice. We might have this sense of really wanting to go out and reciprocate and the joy, and then suddenly it kind of turns around and we're like, I can't possibly. How could I ever give back the amount of what I was given? The value is too great. And one pertinent example of this is our parents. The Buddha said, even if we were to take our parents up on our shoulders and carry them on our backs for 100 years and do everything for them, still we wouldn't be able to repay all the kindness that they showed us in giving birth to us and taking care of us when we couldn't do anything for ourselves. That's a very powerful statement, and one that some people kind of reject. They're like, oh, my parents are jerks. But that's kind of baked into our society. Is sometimes when we're so affluent and we're so independent and we're so disconnected, the selfishness kind of creeps in. But when we start to crack through it and we start to see what we've been given, then it's very natural we start to explore that territory. Like, how could you balance out, you know, the bitterness of the things that have been done to you by your parents, by seeing that, well, the things that they gave you. And then you start to see that they gave you, and when the mind starts to turn around, you're like, wow, there's so much they've given to me. And maybe I was a jerk to them, or maybe I just didn't recognize it. Maybe I took it for granted. Maybe I took advantage of them. What then? Well, we can't go back and rewrite the past. So what are we supposed to do? Well, that's the paradox. And that's what we kind of will wrestle with as we develop this mind state. And it's a valuable task to kind of consider this paradox and to try to live into it, because that's our reality. And this is why, we start the Four Noble Truths with a noble truth that doesn't sound very noble. There is suffering. Dukkha Ariya Sachan. It's like, hey, can we start with something a bit nicer? But this is that paradox, even in something so beautiful like gratitude or recognizing what's been done for us, there can be a little bit of melancholy with this, like, well, I didn't say thank you when I really needed to, or I didn't understand the depth of what I was being given, or even if I did say thank you, it just doesn't seem like enough. And we've got to live into this, because to be a human being is to be somebody who is benefited by so many living beings, even non-living beings. I'm sitting here today because of the Buddha. And yesterday I was walking down the street here in New York City, and it was a warm day, and I was going over to the local Thai temple, and it was so warm, and I was going for the meal that all I needed was my robes and my bowl. I didn't have to carry a bag or this or that. I didn't have to bring anything. I could just put on my sandals and walk down the road with my bowl and my robes. And it was like, how light, how free, how wonderful. And then I was like, I'm just so grateful to be a monk. And I realized I've been given this opportunity, that this was given to me by the virtue of people who lived 2,500 years ago. They created this system where I could walk out the door of this temple and walk down the road, and I would still get fed. I wouldn't have to carry anything with me. I would be free and light and able to just do good things and delight in the cultivation of wholesome mind states. What an incredible gift. But that's our reality. That's your reality. That's the reality of all beings, is that we live in this interconnected web of exchange. People doing things for us, animals doing things for us, the bees that pollinate the flowers, that lead to all of the food that's grown, the animals that give their lives so that meat can end up on the plates of people who have no plants to eat. And this sustains us. And in some ways, there's no way we could give back to it. And that's where the paradox starts to break down. And we see that this is this idea that we need to reciprocate, or that we can't reciprocate, is in of itself a much more subtle layer of conceit, that there is a self that can reciprocate, or that there is a self that couldn't reciprocate, that there is somebody here who is receiving something. And when this starts to break down, it's not that gratitude breaks down, but that gratitude can finally be free. It can finally expand into the reality of what it is like to be a human being. It's like when we break through that final layer of self-thinking, there is just gratitude. And this is what is referred to as grace, this sense of just being immersed in blessings, coming from all directions, such that we can't even single them out or enumerate them. And this is the full development of a sense of gratitude, is when that sense of we've got to do something, or we've got to respond somehow, starts to settle. And what's left is just this bright, joyful, free mind state of recognition. And it's a recognition of the beauty in everything around us. And for many people, this is the culmination of their spiritual path, is just to get there, to get to that sense of feeling connected to everything, and of seeing the beauty in the world, seeing just the beauty in the world. Even the things that seem really difficult, to that mind state, to that bright and full sense of gratitude, even the challenges seem like a gift. The Buddha once famously exemplified this after Devadatta, his sort of was it a cousin or brother-in-law? I mean, there was some sort of familial relation, but Devadatta was kind of the thorn in his side in some ways, in that as soon as the Buddha went back to his home country and started ordaining his old friends and brothers and cousins as monastics, Devadatta came in and started like making trouble. He got psychic powers and it went to his head. And Devadatta even tried to break up the Sangha at one point and form his own Sangha where he was the Buddha. And it didn't go too well for him. He eventually ended in disgrace and dishonor and lost everything, and then passed away. You know, it's the sort of the symbolic story of that is that the ground opened up and swallowed him for all of the bad things he had done. But after Devadatta passed away, the Buddha was sitting amongst the other bhikkhus, the other monks, and he said, Devadatta was such a wonderful teacher. And that's kind of the reality that we enter into when we've really developed this state and this appreciation and the sense of knowing what's been done for us, is that we see the sort of rough stone that we are when we're beginning spiritual practice, and we start to appreciate the chisel that's helping, you know, break off the rough edges. We start to appreciate the grist that's wearing us smooth. And that's one of the highest forms of gratitude, when wisdom is there and it says, you know, even the bad things have helped make me who I am today, even the difficult things. And so the good and the bad, they're all kind of equal in this way, and that they've helped me get here. And here is this wonderful state where I know what is good. I know what is being done for me. And so it ties right in with the perfection of a Brahmavihara, like metta, in that when all the sense of self dissolves, there's just conditionality, there's just processes happening. And they don't need to be happening to somebody or for somebody or from somebody. We're just part of them, and they're part of us. And so this is what it's like to really dwell in grace, to dwell in blessings, and to have gratitude in our hearts, is to really finally have that place of feeling complete. And the irony of it is that nothing really had to be added, that this is a mind state that we can have in this very moment. It's not dependent on people giving us anything, because if we're breathing, then we've been given things. And if we're a part of any social network, then we're interdependent, we're connected, and things are flowing all the time between us. And so I've given some thoughts and some reflections. I hope some of this means something. I've also given a bit of exercises that one might be able to do to try to develop this, if one is interested in it. And I highly encourage you, if ever you're finding that your practice is getting a little stale or a little dull, or you're not sure what direction to go in, try this. Try bringing in some gratitude, and see if it doesn't just set you right back into a state of, oh yeah, this is what we're doing. We're getting over suffering. We're getting over ourself. And so I offer these thoughts for your reflection tonight. May you be well.